Today I went to my usual spot to make a video, and there's some people there sitting and whatnot, and it just becomes kind of awkward, like I'm chatting about whatever, and they're over there, just kind of there. So I walked all the way down there, so uh, and it wasn't super ideal, so I'm in the dark again. And with that, I guess I'll talk about how the occult is considered a dark topic, and just sort of by default. Like, whether you're dealing with angels, whether you're dealing with demons, whether you're dealing with deity work, like neo-paganism, doesn't matter. It's all dark. Dark, dark, dark. So, I guess I'll start with the Satan scare in U.S. Like, in the occult today, like a lot of people that there's a lot of people that are interested in the occult but don't really know a whole lot about it, don't have a lot of knowledge. They just know enough to be like, oh, the Pride Month is linked to like this month of worshiping this pagan goddess that's mentioned in the Bible. I think, that's like the conspiracy theory of it. I don't know enough about the history to know if that's true. It sounds true, I feel like it's true, right? Feels true and is true can be more similar than you'd think, though. So, so a lot of people know that sort of stuff, or like, they'll understand that a lot of the pagan sort of dark like the dark nature god archetype is kind of similar to the way we think of Satan, even though probably our idea of Satan comes from that completely, and doesn't predate that sort of archetype of like Bacchus or Pan or Cernunnos. I think there's a few others I'm forgetting. They're pretty similar gods. I think Loki could even be thrown in there because he has like the really long horns. I think that's accurate. I think I've seen some like older mythology books where he has the long horns, like in Marvel Comics. So, so yeah. And then there's definitely a lot of people that relate Saturn to Satan, which I would say that's probably the closest. But like, I wouldn't relate Saturn to like Pan or Cernunnos or whatever, these different gods, that much at least. It's interesting though, because the planet Saturn rules over the sign of Capricorn, which is the goat, right? But then, like, if we relate a lot of these ideas um, to Baphomet, and we look at Hindu mythology, Baphomet is a separate being than Saturn. Saturn is Shanidev, and that's the ruler of Saturn. And then Baphomet is Daksha Prajapati, which is why I really like Hinduism, is because there's so many topics, there's so many concepts in Hinduism that are like some hidden secret thing in Western esotericism, or Western religion rather. But Hinduism, I think there's a thin line between the exoteric and the esoteric. In fact, I've heard that in a lot of temples, people just go and sit and meditate and have whatever experience. I don't know what that means. I mean, I've heard some gurus will like do little miracles, and people will be like, "Oh, big experience! How spiritual!" And that's maybe doing more harm than good. I don't know. There's some guy around here that can like produce Rudraksha beads from thin air. It's a nice parlor trick. Uh, I mean, I can't do it, so good enough. You have to have some kind of spiritual basis for that, but I think you have to have some kind of spiritual stature to produce things like that, I think. But at the same time, I think that it is a bit cheap, and I think people will tend too easily to be like, oh, a parlor trick, and that sort of proves that you have some sort of power. So, but I don't know. I mean, Jesus did like more or less. He did tricks that he did miracles that explain something about himself, but at the same time, it's like proclaiming that hey, I am something different. I'm doing something different. So that's pretty neat. But so I think even relating it to Jesus, it's interesting to think about what uh like parlor tricks versus like miracles. What does that mean? Is there a difference? I mean, if you produce something amazing with some kind of esoteric knowledge, some kind of magical uh, power, then is that already miraculous or what? I mean, the Bible even talks about some people doing magic. Um, is it the Bible or am I thinking of an apocryphal text? I remember one time. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of one apocryphal text where Peter is facing off against a magician or something like that. And I think angels come and bail him out. Yeah. So forget that. So parlor tricks is another thing that gets people really superstitious, either very much like believing or very much like afraid. And I have seen this with one individual in particular, but there can be almost like when there's proof and it works, there can become almost more of a fear then from that. I think that's kind of interesting. Um, I think there's not a lot of reason to be afraid of a lot of these things, though. I mean, if someone's going around throwing around curses, okay, that's one thing. And if some people really have the propensity to be a black magician, and you should like the key with people like that, if you can identify someone like that, is not to ostracize them or piss them off in any way. It's to keep them very well treated. Like I'm thinking of one time in the Srimad Bhagavatam when Manduka Muni comes to visit the Pandavas, and yeah, so little background: Manduka Muni is Shiva cosplaying as a Shaivist, so he he's worshiping himself. He's a Shaivist yogi. He's cosplaying like that. Like that's his avatar is worshiping himself. So it's almost like Shiva doing sort of the what is it, the Chaitanya thing before Chaitanya. So I think that's an interesting parallel. So Manduka Muni comes along, and the Pandavas already ate, and he is coming with all of his followers and expects to be fed. And um, so the Pandavas, especially Draupadi, is like, "Oh no, these guys are coming, and we ate all the food. They're coming late. They should have come earlier." And they're thinking like they're Shaivists and they're like basically yogis out in the wild. I apparently had some reputation of being mean or something, and they're like, he's gonna be mad at us and like curse us or something. So then Krishna um, takes the little bit, like the small half portion or whatever of what was left of the food and eats it and said, "I'm satisfied." And then all of the Manduka and his followers were suddenly felt full, and they turned away and walked away. And the explanation is that when Krishna's needs are filled, the needs of his devotees are filled. Um, yeah, and Manduka Muni, the reason he turned away is he didn't want to come and not eat anything and be impolite. So, Vedic culture is so interesting. So then yeah, but I think this is a really interesting picture of a black magician, where it's like the black magician is passing through, give him what he needs, make sure he's fed, make sure he's watered, make sure he doesn't like Sodom and Gomorrah us or something. Uh, so it probably wouldn't have been that bad, but yeah, so that's the thing because if you ostracize or do anything like that to a black magician is a spiritual person. Um, a black magician that uh, that only causes harm to people, like someone just flippantly causing harm, I would say that's probably not. Ugh. I wouldn't suppose someone like that would be that powerful. I know a lot of black magicians will actually call on different gods and whatnot to assist in their magical practice. A lot of people today think that that these gods are just us, so it's just us figuring out some way to um it's like this quasi chaos magic way of viewing that we're just trying to find a way to give ourselves a permission slip to actually cause this with our minds. So this is pretty prevalent. Like even Damien Eccles currently says things like this. I feel like maybe his opinion might change. He's very locked into like that uh, Aleister Crowley school of thought of magic, I think. But Aleister Crowley, he said that he at one point got a more materialistic psychological view of magic, still believing the mind has power over things externally, but apparently he changed his mind later. Damon Eccles believes that it's all psychological, the mind controlling things out of the body, and that a lot of these beings don't exist. It's just some phenomenon we're ping ponging at ourselves or something. So it's some deep recess of the mind, resource of the mind that we can't really access logically and more consciously through our own ego. So we have to create like an external alter ego thing. I don't believe in that like at all. I think it would go against a lot of my experiences. I've had some pretty cool experiences. So um but yeah, so I think it's a really common thought now that like this is all if I pray to the demon king of dumpster fire hell where the worst kinds of people go to get some effect for me. Actually, I'm not praying to anything. I'm just permitting myself to get the result I need. And if I have to pray to the god of dumpster fire hell, then so be it. Because I'm only unlocking something within myself. Maybe it's first chakra because first chakra is like inner earth, which some people relate to hell, like deep earth, that that energetic thing which generates life through the plants or whatever, or all life really. So that makes me uncomfortable. I think this is where the occult people in the occult sort of give us all a bad name. And I guess I'm a little bit calling out some people I know here. I don't mean it like uh I don't mean to be harsh, I guess. It's my opinion and I think it's correct. I'm pretty sure it's correct. Uh and I don't know anyone who goes way off the rails doing something totally insane. I mean, the worship of Kali is typical. Uh that's especially if you're a good magician, I think it's not even that dangerous. Um so it's also a bit of a criticism, but I think in general, it does give a little bit of a bad name to be like, oh, I'm worshiping, you know, Moloch or something that children were sacrificed to. But it's just me permitting myself to use my own mind powers. Like what? If it's really some hidden recess of the mind, I could see angels. I could maybe see like I could I could see that being one perspective you could look at goetic beings with. More just Lucifer really. Because goetic beings are really clearly a hodgepodge of different beings from different traditions that I always, even before I knew this, I cringed looking at the Goetia because it's talking as if it's a very like particular um hierarchy and everything else. I don't think that's true. Maybe it is. I don't know. People have success with the whole president, or not president, marquis, king, duke, prince system, and that figures into their practice, and it's effective for them somehow, or not effective. A lot of things can be effective, but it's enlightening, and it gives structure, which I think is a little more powerful, and it figures into their unverified personal gnosis, their sort of information that they receive simply as a byproduct of the practice, or not the byproduct, but the main product in some cases. Some people are into gnosis, and I think that's a very positive thing. So that's on the other end of that's believers. That's not the psychological sort of manifestation crowd explanation. Anyways, I guess I could see that those things, but I think there comes a point where it's like, I mean, a lot of people that are into the left-hand path are edgelords. Now, a lot of the people that I think are prominent voices of the left-hand path, at least that I've come across, I mean, I have a specific taste, and so I come across people that I like more, that are more, genuine, sincere people that are more into like the left-hand path, in the way that I would say it's like the inner path. Like I would say the right-hand path is like the outer path, and the left-hand path is like the inner path. I'd almost say the left-hand path is more powerful and more intrinsic. But that's a tough thing. And also, I hear left-hand path people they're in left-hand path in the way I'm talking, still working with dark beings and whatnot, but I hear them complaining about witch wars, where like basically a bunch of right-hand path like white magicians will watch some YouTube videos from a left-hand path magician. I won't say dark magician. I think that's not quite correct in this case. Sometimes it is, of course, but someone who has some idea about Satanism or whatever, and they'll just send all kinds of magic at such a person. This can get pretty dangerous from that because of that, and I've had some experiences kind of like that. I'm not gonna come out and say like, oh, I was in a witch war or something. I don't know. I've had some shit thrown at me. I know that. So, um, yeah. So I hear them complaining about that sort of thing. So I think people, the benevolent right hand pathers, like throwing a bunch of shit at left hand path people, out of the blue, I guess. I don't know. I think sometimes people that are more the moderate left hand path will be like, oh yeah, Moloch, he or Baphomet, they're just what is demon? Demon is, what you don't want to see in yourself. It's not a terrible being that causes havoc. I've in my experience, these beings are quite dark and will awaken things in you that are have the potential to awaken things in you that are, extremely dark and hazardous to your mental health. I could totally see from the experience I've had, just with brief communications with some of these beings, that like I could see how someone could. I'll talk about Baphomet. Um, I could see how someone could interact with Baphomet and then fall into some kind of like let's just say some pretty dark criminal things, actually. Like with Baphomet, I know one thing that he sort of tried to cast over me was there's sort of this almost dreamy, like sometimes you can focus on a being and you'll be in their mindset, right? You'll achieve unity with them, and their whole mindset will sort of bake into you a little bit, to some extent. It's not total. This is more common with beings in the left hand path. Is that they just take over your life and take you for a ride for a while, and you learn through that process, and that's kind of a spiritual shortcut, um, which I think is fair. I think depending on your situation, it might be fair enough, but it just depends. With Baphomet, it was like, especially if sort of the idea of Bacchus and Dionysus is related to Baphomet, I see the frenzy. I experienced that just a little bit. The throwing aside all inhibitions and just going with the flow. I don't want to talk about my sort of conversation with Baphomet too much, but that's one thing he showed me for a bit. I pushed that away because it was quite unsettling. And that was just, I just had a conversation with him once. He just was just there, just appeared to me out of the blue. I didn't spend time focusing on him, attempting to gain unity with him or anything like that. It was just something that sort of spontaneously happened, which is not unusual for this occult practice. So I think a lot of these beings, if you were to focus on them and push sort of a unity with them over a long period of time, sure, someone could become a serial killer or something like that, through that sort of thing. I think that would be extremely unusual, and I feel like there's also cases where right hand path things could do the same thing. I do think demonic being like so-called demonic beings get a bit of a bad rap, especially when we talk about Guisha, because a lot of the beings in the Guisha, calling them demons is probably not even accurate. Okay, Asmodeus goes back to Ashmadeva, which is a demonic being, a helper of the great demonic force and Zoroastrianism. And I think that's because in Zoroastrianism he's associated with Azi, who's like the personality of lust. So to me that rings like in Hinduism, and where I think it talks about this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's this brother and sister demon that are married, that have been produced by multiple generations of incest, and they are the personality of anger and lust. And so that kind of sounds like that's what that is. So that would be um, Ashmadeva and Azi, and I'm wondering if that's actually now Asmodeus and Lilith. So okay, that they are probably demonic. But how about like Astaroth? Astaroth probably goes back to, probably Astaroth and Astarte are the same, related to Aphrodite, Astarte, Ishtar, Inanna. So it's a big whole history of like this feminine fertility warrior goddess, and now it's like a dude that rides a dragon. You know, okay. um, and so I think there's a lot of truth to this idea that uh, Christianity kind of cleaned house of what religion was there before, but then had this sort of back doorway of calling upon these beings again. I think it's more complex than that. I think there is a legitimate, or there may be a legitimate adversarial relationship between like quote unquote uh, angels of like Gabriel, Michael, the classics, Raphael, Uriel. Those are the four elemental angels of like basic. Uh, in the lesser banishing ritual in the pentagram, you call upon them, and then I think if you do the lesser hexagram ritual, it's either that, or I don't know if it's then, or if you upgrade to the supreme hexagon ritual, that you at some point you call upon planetary angels, and then Damien Eccles talks about calling upon zodiacal angels after that. I know more about this sort of thing from Damien Eccles. I'm not so obsessed with ceremonial magic. I think it's really, really effective. But like, I'm getting to the point now where some of these magics are starting to, like, my energy body needs time to adjust. Like, I went just a wee bit too fast. Like, I'm okay, but you can actually burn out your energy body a little bit and get super sick, apparently. Which I believe it. I'm feeling like I pushed it a little bit much, but I take my time and rest. So, which I think I said my piece about Guisha. Um, so yeah, on the part of energy body stuff, you can hurt yourself with these practices. Like at one point, I actually uh, dislocated my left shoulder when doing yoga. Okay, I was doing yoga. I was really getting into those poses. Really, getting a good stretch. It felt good. It felt good. And my left shoulder just well, actually, it wasn't while I was doing yoga, but it was caused by the yoga. So I finished yoga because I was working really hard and I just really needed to get a good stretch so I could bounce back from the really hard work that I'm pretty thin, and it's sort of, I would say it would be too much for me, but I actually was able to use some sort of like visualization techniques and things like that to keep myself doing it in different times, especially like in later jobs, not like later in my career in industry in factories. So, because at first, of course, I didn't know these things, and I learned them because I had a shit ton of free time on my hands because I dropped out of college. I started my real education of Magick. I don't regret that for sure. I mean, cutting out college really helped me have space for some of this important work. So, um, let's see. Yeah. So the yoga. So I did this intense yoga, and then I got in my car, and something was in the back seat, and I had to go. I had to like reach back and get it. So I leaned on the center console, and it was in such a way that it would like slide back and forth to be like an armrest, the top piece. And so it had this sliding top piece. I just forgot that it was sliding. That it was able to slide. So I'm leaning back and grabbing something I need, and I kind of like it slipped, and then my arm like fell really weirdly, and yeah, my left shoulder was a little bit out of socket. I was able to pop it back in, but I broke out into a sweat and started shivering. So I think that would be, I don't know if that would be considered a dislocation or just like a really bad like subluxing, but where the shoulder comes out and a little bit and goes back in. It's not. I guess it'd be a subluxing actually, but um yeah. So I actually hurt myself pretty bad with yoga. Um, because that sort of almost injury, like my arm wasn't up to real work for like 4 weeks or more, three 4 weeks actually, something like that. It was a while. It was some matter of weeks before it was better enough where it was kind of normal, and then it took quite a while longer to like really be better. And energy work is kind of the same. Like, okay, I really enjoyed at the beginning of my practice, like doing what's called like general energy work, where I would just move my energy of my like energy body around and do different things with it, and that really helped me, and I could really survive some weird scenarios. So so then or actually now I've been doing more powerful practices that bring energy in from outside, like in a really like forceful way, in a way, or not forceful, but there's just doors I think that are hard to open in the energy body, and you can open a lot of them or you can maybe if you think of it as one door, you can open it really wide with certain particular practices, and if you're unable to handle the surge of cosmic energies, you can get sick. Also, if you overstimulate Kundalini energies coming from your sacrum too early, that can also make you sick. So